Hello everyone, I got what I wanted, and I'm quitting YouTube now. Thank you all for being here. This has been a social experiment. I'm going to be performing live in Toccoa, Georgia at a music festival. If you want to support indie music and see me live, the tickets are super cheap, and I'll be hanging out in the area before and after the show if you want to talk. Check out the website below to get more information, and check out my music channel, also linked below, if you want to get an idea of what my music sounds like. Thank you for watching. On to the video. We all know what it's like to feel uncomfortable in our own skin. But what if that very flesh blanket, your skin, stopped being yours? What if your body betrayed you in ways that you couldn't even imagine? Body horror is much more than just gore. It's a genre that digs under your skin, literally. It forces us to confront the fragility of our bodies, the fear of losing control, and the terror of becoming something unrecognizable. Today we're diving into some of the most extreme, jaw-dropping, and disturbing depictions of body horror ever put to film. These movies don't just push boundaries, they completely obliterate them. And love or hate them, one thing that you can't deny is that they are unforgettable. So grab a blanket, keep the lights on, and try not to think about how your bones feel right now, or how your tongue sits uncomfortably in your mouth. And let's talk about the films that make us question what it is to be human. The human body is a vessel, a masterpiece of nature. But what happens when that masterpiece is distorted? Body horror is a genre that doesn't just unsettle you, it invades you. It crawls under your skin and lingers, a visceral reminder of the weakness of the human form. It's about violation, the violation of boundaries, of identity, of the essence of what it is to be human. It takes the familiar, this vessel we inhabit, the flesh we trust, and turns it into something grotesque, alien, and uncontrollable. Your body is not a sanctuary, but a prison, one that can betray you at any moment. This kind of horror preys on our deepest and most primal fears, of decay, of aging, of mutation, of losing ourselves to something we cannot understand or contain. What happens when the body rebels, when the mind fractures, when the line between human and monster becomes blurred beyond recognition? And body horror forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that we are not as whole, as stable, or as safe as we would like to believe. If I'm being honest, body horror makes me uncomfortable. And for the longest time, I borderline avoided the genre entirely, despite my fascination with horror as a whole. Like, do you ever watch something and feel kind of vaguely like that something is happening to you? Because that's what happens to me. I've always been more enamored by the psychological elements of the genre, although I've got to say, the special effects in body horror is some of the coolest and gnarliest stuff I've ever witnessed in film. Now, why would a guy this squeamish be reviewing or discussing body horror at all? Well, in the last few years, my appreciation for the genre has only grown, as well as its ability to make me confront certain fears that maybe I subconsciously avoid in a head-on manner. And also the films can be fun in a fucked up kind of way. I tried to find what people consider to be the best of the genre, a few of which I had seen before, many of which I had not, and I watched them, me. So now we're gonna talk about them. Spoilers for most of these, nothing crazy, but here we go. A group of scientists and engineers, the best and bravest of humankind, find themselves suddenly forced to hold down a peer as he convulses. Only moments ago they were sitting together, eating and laughing, and now this dude is writhing on the table. They try to force something into his mouth so he doesn't accidentally bite his tongue off, and as they struggle, his chest suddenly pops like a cyst with blood shooting up like a geyser. A disgusting, squirming parasite wriggles its way out of his gaping chest cavity, leaving behind a twitching, drained corpse, the others watching in vain. Turns out bro's tongue was the least of their worries. To be honest with you, Alien is not my favorite movie. I saw it for the first time some years ago and rewatched it specifically for this video, and my feelings about it have softened a bit. Often considered one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and a landmark classic in the genre. And what genre is that? What genre is the movie Alien? Yeah, a Western, obviously. The movie follows a spaceship crew who investigate a derelict spaceship and are hunted by a deadly extraterrestrial creature called a xenomorph. While the Xeno is definitely scary on its own, the real horror of Alien is the exploration of losing control of your own body and even questioning what counts as the self. And this is an idea we're going to see repeated over and over again as we get our feet wet in the bloody waters of this genre, where the line blurs between the discernible self versus the other, whatever that might mean. And often this takes place as an invasive transformation. Something I find particularly interesting about this movie is the very obvious emphasis on sexual imagery, from the phallic-looking creature to how the chest buster is kind of just a male birth scene. Oh god, flashbacks. It's a wildly subversive movie, both for the time and still to some extent today. The creature forcibly inserts itself into the guy, then over a very rapid amount of time, its offspring grows inside him, nourishing itself on his flesh before violently exploding out of him in a spectacular fashion. Fun times for the whole family. I don't know if it was intentional, but when we finally get to see the xenomorph, it feels like it's almost biomechanical, a fusion of organic and inorganic matter. Its design, which looks suspiciously like H.R. Giger's trippy art, is beautiful to me. It could lay its eggs in me. That would be fine. The xenomorph isn't just a mindless killer, it's a predator. It's intelligent, it's patient, and it's relentless. It's not just hunting the crew, it's playing with them, creating a sense of inevitability and hopelessness. I need to confess, but when I first saw this movie, I thought there was a lot of meandering and kind of useless tech jargon. And rewatching it, it's still not my favorite movie. Just for context, at the time, and still kind of to some extent to this day, my favorite horror movie and one of my favorite movies of all time was The Shining. It's not like I'm disconnected from movies from like that time frame, you know? I don't know, Alien just never clicked with me in the same way that a bunch of other similar movies did. Anyways. A body is laid gently on the floor, quivering from its recent awful transformation. Nathan Gardner watched his son get grotesquely fused into his wife's back. While his family are desperately trying to understand what's going on, Nathan is strangely calm. Going mad? Maybe just in shock. He stands up, telling his kids to stay and tend to their mother. Thoughts racing as he goes to a nearby closet to retrieve a handgun, he then heads outside to the barn next to his house. The trees sway outside as foul wind brushes against them, the leaves shimmering a weird purple color. Nathan enters the barn he built with his own hands, which house his beloved pet animals, those hands now clutching a weapon he intends to use if necessary against them. As he enters, the smell nearly knocks him to his knees. It's hideous, like curdled milk and rotted flesh and burning hair. Slowly walking in, his eyes go wide at the sight before him. Where once there was a dozen living creatures in this space, there now seems to be just one. Whatever happened to his wife had also happened here, a monstrous mass of fused alpacas bleeding with distorted eyes and seemingly no real limbs. Their flesh pulled tight over the bones, giving the faces a sickly, emaciated pallor, while the mutated compound organs housed in the meat heap are bloating and steaming. Nathan's mind breaks, and the shock vanishes for a moment, long enough for him to fire his weapon directly into his flock, screaming as the shepherd becomes the wolf. The Color Out of Space is based on the H.P. Lovecraft story of the same name, and it was one of the first horror films that I ever watched. I remember when this channel was still a tabletop role-playing game channel with like 100 subscribers, and I watched this movie with some friends in the old Discord server. It was striking to me then, and it also started my fascination with Nicolas Cage's acting, a fascination which has unfortunately continued to this day. While the film was fairly low budget, and I've seen some people describe it as a hit or miss, it has a special place in my heart, and frankly, I love it. We follow a quiet family whose lives are thrown into upheaval after a meteorite crash lands in their backyard and dissolves into a strange energy that manifests itself as a color not quite in the range of human perception. I always found the basic idea of the short story very interesting. Like, my entire introduction to horror as a genre was discovering Lovecraft when I was like 14 years old, but I thought this would be really difficult to emulate in a visual format. And thankfully, I was wrong. The most obvious body horror elements are the insane fusions we get to see, done with amazing practical effects and puppets. The alien poison gets in their water, driving them crazy over time, but when the light touches them, it seems to melt and rearrange living matter. It's funny, I think of it as something that turns them into the perfect entity, one body, one mind. Well, perfect for the color to drain the life out of, that is. I don't want to spoil too much, but there's a scene where the daughter is locked in a room with the fused mother and son, and that scene is absolutely horrifying. The acting and the practical effects are so well done, and this movie is underrated as hell. I think you should watch it if you haven't already. It does a really good job of showcasing that unknown element, which makes Lovecraft's material work as well as it does, while also providing the story with more fleshed out and three-dimensional characters, something Lovecraft almost always lacked imagination writing. There's an ending sequence where we learn that the color has poisoned the water indefinitely, and that the water near the house will probably end up getting connected to the city's reservoir. Food for thought, but I think a cool interpretation of this version of the color is as a metaphor for environmental destruction and for tampering with forces outside of our control. It starts small. She collapses to the floor, and her eye's pupil starts to morph until it splits, and then it spreads. Her body begins to rebel, the substance inside her twisting and contorting her flesh into something unrecognizable. Her back splits open, the skin peeling back like the pages of a book, revealing a mass of writhing, blackened tissue. The flesh is no longer her own. It's a prison, a mockery of what she believes she once was. And as she collapses to the floor, her transformation complete, one thought remains. This was worth it. This is the cost of beauty. A satirical body horror film that follows a celebrity that is slowly being discriminated against due to her age and who is slowly dying on the inside, who is scouted by a strange, unseen group selling a weird new drug, simply called The Substance. The Substance is a terrifying exploration of beauty, aging, and identity, using body horror to expose the grotesque consequences of society's obsession with youth and perfection. I know it's billed as a satire, which implies comedy, but even as a 21-year-old and a dude, this movie made me feel ill. Gotta love relapsing into an eating disorder, am I right? Seriously though, despite my own personal, whatever with the film, it's incredibly well done. It's nasty and incredibly well done. The basic premise is there's a substance which gets injected into a subject, who then produces a perfect clone of themselves. And by perfect clone, I mean literally. The entity that results claws its way out of your skin, looking decades younger than the original subject. The superficial best performance, health and aesthetic-wise. The two bodies must switch consciousness every 7 days without exception, with the inactive body remaining unconscious or like asleep. The film is fast-paced and feels like it was edited with a razor. It's beautifully shot, and it ends with a sequence that's so full of gore that I'd imagine at least half of the 5,500 gallons of fake blood that were used in this movie were expended on that one scene alone. But to be honest, it's the quieter moments that stuck with me the most. The narrative breaks down when Demi Moore's character Elizabeth keeps getting overshadowed by her bioengineered, drug-induced counterpart, and they seem to split into two distinct beings with separate thoughts and, importantly, separate desires. A fun question that the movie doesn't even actually answer is where this line is being drawn. When does the clone cease to be a vessel for Elizabeth's soul and become not even an extension of Elizabeth's consciousness, but its own entirely separate entity? To be honest, I don't know if it ever was. In fact, there's a case to be made that it was never anything but. A man stares intently at his own reflection, not really recognizing the person before him. His face is somehow both puffy and gaunt, with pores filled and raised above the surrounding skin. Elongated hairs stretch out from his cheeks, which he tries to remove with a buzzing razor, only to discover cutting these hairs causes sharp, excruciating pain. He violently throws the razor with a newfound strength he did not possess before. His eyes are wide and dart back and forth across his face in the mirror. And in rapid succession, he discovers his teeth are falling out and his nails are popping off. What is this? Is he dying? How much worse is this degeneration going to get? A remake of the 1958 sci-fi classic and one of the most immediately recognizable films by David Cronenberg, The Fly stands out as one of the most profoundly disturbing examinations of bodily transformation ever made. A scientist accidentally fuses his DNA with that of insect, well, a fly, and terrible things ensue. The film's horror primarily stems from the slow motion transformation of the main character, a process that Cronenberg rendered with scientific precision. Unlike many traditional monster movies where the transformation happens instantaneously and suddenly, this metamorphosis occurs in stages, each stage more disturbing than the last. Early signs appear subtle, increased strength and sexual stamina that seem almost beneficial, and this makes the later deterioration all the more horrifying, as both man and audience realize too late that these changes were not improvements, but just the first symptoms of something profoundly wrong. The practical effects in this movie maintain their power even decades later because they just feel so organic, reaching in to our most primal fears about our bodies failing us and letting us see exactly how that might play out. And as the physical form deteriorates, so does the mental state, creating a double tragedy of self-awareness. He remains cognitively human enough to understand what's happening to him, but he is powerless to stop it, fully comprehending that he is becoming something inhuman. He realizes that he is losing his human reason and compassion and is being driven by primitive impulses beyond his control. And this erosion of identity proves more scary than any physical transformation. The realization that the mind and soul might remain trapped inside a body that no longer reflects them, maybe never reflected them at all. Cronenberg's genius here lies in showing us that the real horror isn't the fly, but the transformation process itself. That inevitable change and decay that awaits me and you and us all. The film endures because it speaks to universal human anxieties about the one thing that we can never escape: our own fragile, fallible human bodies. The Fly forces us to confront the grotesque poetry of our biology, that we are just a temporarily stable collection of cells, only one mutation away from something else entirely. A tall, thin man walks briskly into a room where 3 captives are tied to medical cots, unable to escape their horrible fate or the doctor's annoying voice. He introduces himself over their yells for help and desperate queries. It's clear they haven't been awake for long. They have no idea what's going on, but lucky for them, this top surgeon of separating Siamese twins is ready to help. Don't pay any mind to the fact that he's retired. He's taken a new approach with these victims, and they will not survive long. Apparently, the idea for the human centipede arose when Tom Six, the writer, director, and co-producer of the film, made a joke about how to effectively punish a pedophile. The basic premise of this delightful movie is 3 victims are surgically stick together, mouth to anus, where their gastric systems combine to form one long tube through 3 people. Essentially, they would be releasing waste into each other's mouths and then redigesting the waste until it reached the last person in the line. Why was this movie made? You might be asking yourself. And the answer is because it could be. While it doesn't have any redeeming qualities aside from the shock value, really, released in 2009, The Human Centipede certainly did shock almost whoever saw it, becoming one of the more controversial and polarizing films in modern horror. With its grotesque premise, pretty extreme body horror, unflinching exploration of human suffering, the film pushes the boundaries of taste and decency. To be fair, there are way worse movies, like extreme movies, but this one managed to sneak its way into common conversation and is also in that one song, Red Flags, where the girl's favorite movie is Human Centipede, and I think that's worth mentioning, just because it's a good song. We are shown pretty graphic imagery of exposed tissue getting connected and then torn apart. But to be honest with you guys, the first movie in this series, which is the most well-known one, is way more tastefully, if you can even call it that, put together than any of the sequels are. The first sequel is just even more sick and disturbing, and then the second sequel is taken so far and is so just absurdly over the top that it almost loops around to becoming a parody of the initial premise. Yeah, the third one's like a comedy. That's so weird. Anyways. In the dim light of the Cotton family attic, the air is heavy with the stench of decay. This thing is finally going to be reborn. The floorboards begin to shake and rattle, nails popping up like we're opening a coffin, smoke billowing up from beneath, too deep. Suddenly, 2 long appendages burst out of the wood, stabilizing on either side of the spine that is rising between them, a grotesque amalgamation of flesh, blood, and viscera pulsating with a sickening life of its own. Wet, squelching noises accompany every movement. The transformation is agonizingly slow, each moment drawn out to maximize the audience's discomfort. The camera lingers on the appendage, the bones slick with blood and sinew, before pulling back to reveal the rest of Frank's body forming. His muscles and skin begin to knit themselves together, the process both fascinating and repulsive. The practical effects are astonishingly detailed, with every tendon, vein, and strip of flesh rendered in horrifying clarity. Clive Barker's directorial debut, proving he can literally do anything, be it write books, plays, poems, or write and direct movies. Frustrated with previous attempts to adapt his work, he took the monumental task of bringing the intensity of his sexually charged horror stories to the silver screen, and now we are left with a masterpiece. As they say, God works in mysterious ways. While it spawned 9 sequels and a recent reboot, tonight we are going to be focusing on the original, following the story of a woman who loses herself to temptation in a larger conceptual piece about seeking pleasure beyond the realm of what is considered normal. The body horror of Hellraiser is hidden behind a deep exploration of hedonism. The real beating heart of Hellraiser are the Cenobites, otherworldly beings who exist beyond the boundaries of pain and pleasure. Led by a creature who was nameless in the first film but later came to be known as Pinhead, these creatures are explorers in the further regions of experience. Their appearance is a blend between religious iconography and BDSM gear, with leather-clad bodies, mutilated skin, exposed hooks and nails. They are both terrifying and kind of fascinating, embodying the film's central theme, the thin line between ecstasy and agony, the extremes of human existence and experience, a reminder that the pursuit of pleasure to the detriment of all else could lead to undescribable pain. But that's the catch, isn't it? Neuroscientists have found that pain and pleasure activate many of the same regions of the brain, which stimulate opioid and dopamine release systems. While the most recent studies I found indicated pain activating the pleasure area is a fleeting thing that only occurred directly before the pain actually hit, it's been widely considered true for longer than Aristotle was alive that pain and pleasure are very closely connected and could overlap. And Hellraiser's scary because it takes that idea to its logical conclusion, to where we can no longer distinguish a difference between the two. If I'm not mistaken, Cronenberg would later take that even further, that idea, but that's a discussion for another time. A television screen flashes blue frames on a wall, a comedy of errors about taking a fall. A young woman's eyes slowly open to reveal a toy or puppet talking to her through the screen in a distorted, pitch-shifted voice. Her disorientation is palpable as she struggles to make sense of her surroundings, her breathing shallow and panicked, her eyes darting around the room as the puppet speaks. "Hello, Amanda," it says. "I want to play a game. The rules are simple. Whether you survive is entirely up to you." Suddenly, she realizes her head is entrapped in a strange device the puppet refers to as a reverse bear trap, an evil-looking, grotesque contraption of cold metal. We linger on the trap, emphasizing its weight and the inevitability of its purpose. Amanda's terror is mirrored in the audience as she realizes the severity of her situation. She has to find a key to disarm the trap before a timer runs out, or else it will rip her head apart. She frantically looks around for anything that might help her, and what's this? A man? Maybe he can help. Oh, no, he's dead. And there's a giant question mark drawn onto his stomach. I think we know where the key is. Ah, shit, he's still alive. I love Saw. Like, it is so awesome. Like, okay, so it's not great by any means. And after the third one, the quality is so inconsistent and all over the place that it can be difficult to tell what genre we're even watching. But I love all of them. They are very near and dear to me. They were my first introduction to horror after finding Lovecraft. And the basic premise of an escape room that can kill you with a morally ambiguous villain who thinks he's like helping people in some psychological way, and every movie has an insane twist at the end that makes a fairly stupid movie feel incredibly smart. Dude, these movies are so fucking good. Before James Wan and Leigh Whannell became the faces of modern blockbuster horror they are today, they made a cute little short film which would eventually become the first Saw movie, a groundbreaking film that would define early 2000s horror flicks, characterized by a grimy and gritty feel, fast-paced, seizure-inducing editing, and often non-linear storytelling. We follow the stories of the victims of a serial killer named Jigsaw, who thinks he can make people appreciate their lives more by bringing them closer to losing them. Jigsaw is a fascinating character. I've been meaning to make a long-winded video about the entirety of the Saw franchise since last Halloween. No, the Halloween before the last. I don't know. I started it. It got pretty long, and then I was like, I don't know if people will watch this since I don't know how big. Like, I know they're popular movies, but I also know that a lot of people don't really like them. So yeah, let me know down below if you'd watch that, actually. Saw disturbs its audiences through its exploration of moral dilemmas, extreme physical suffering, and the psychological torment of its characters. A lot of people call these movies torture porn, and as someone that has seen a few movies that actually fit that description, I want to point out that calling it that is kinda uncharitable, although I do understand why a non-horror fan might call it that. It's a pretty straightforward thriller with a lot of gore, a bit of a detective story, and later the franchise turns into a glorified soap opera with characters that were supposed to be dead returning to reprise their roles, and long drawn out convoluted relationships between the characters and all of the previous films. Also, honorable mention to Hostel, which kind of does a similar thing, but Eli Roth's take on the whole thing is just not as interesting to me, so I chose to talk about Saw instead. Over time, I have come to love body horror and how universal it is. It speaks to a fear that transcends culture, gender, and even time. The fear of losing yourself and your identity, and of becoming something unrecognizable. In a world that increasingly demands perfection and conformity, body horror serves as a reminder that the human experience is messy, unpredictable, and often horrifying. It asks us, what are we willing to sacrifice to hold on to our humanity? And what happens if that humanity just slips through our fingers? It's not just about destruction of the body, it's about resilience of the human spirit in the face of that destruction. The scream, the struggle, the desperate fight to hold on to who we are even as our bodies betray us. There's that hope that keeps us going, and it reminds me of that hope. And when the credits roll and the lights come up, I am left with a chilling thought. The true horror isn't the monster on the screen, it's me. It's a fear I hold, something just waiting for the right moment to strike. Thank you for watching. I made a list of like 30 movies and we talked about 7 of them. So if you're interested in a follow-up with more of my opinions on some great body horror films, let me know down below. Be sure to like this video, shove it down the throats of all of your friends, and thank you for watching. This video was sponsored by you on Patreon. So thank you for the support over there. I will see you in the next video. Huge thank you to Kettle, Hadley, Bees, Lori, Joy, Tommy, Amelia, Boris, Pan, Thomas, Audrey, Justin, Lou, Ray, ZK, Tom, Dave, Elkie, Stardrop, Nude, George, Joseph, and Mr. Fox. See you in the next video. Goodbye.